WorkJoy Jam. I am not your host, Beth Storwood. I'm your guest host, Simon Arrowsmith, and with me is a very, very special guest. It's Beth Storwood.
Hello, Simon. Thank you so much for sitting in my seat today as
Yes.
the interviewer, the host. It feels very weird to be on the other side of the desk, as it were, and being interviewed today, but I'm very excited, and thank you so much for joining me and being the host, the guest host with the most today.
Well, I'm excited too. I'm really looking forward to hearing all about why we're doing this special episode and getting into it. So why don't you tell us why we're doing a special episode?
Okay, so I'm going to tell you why. We are doing a special episode because I am about to launch my first ever book. Da, da, da,
Amazing.
which is, here we go, as demonstrated by my not so glamorous
Lovely.
assistant myself, WorkJoy, a toolkit for a better working life. So depending on when you're listening to this, if you've got it on the first day it's coming out next week, the book. But if you're coming back and listening to this episode, the WorkJoy book is out there. So it is my first book. It's a bit of a labour of love. And we thought that I could be a guest on the WorkJoy Jam and talk a bit about the book and act like a guest rather than a host. And then I was like, who should be the host with the most? And I was like, well, none other than Simon Arrowsmith, the best storyteller in the world, should be that host. So here he is.
Amazing. I think it, first off, congratulations, because this is a monumental feat. When did we started talking about this book? Like, we were in lockdown, weren't we?
Yeah.
It was pandemic times, and I mean, goodness, and here we are. So, okay, let's start by thinking about, why did this book need to be written, and who's it for, do you think?
Okay. Oh, big questions. So I suppose I'll go a little bit further back in that I've probably always wanted to write a book. It's always been something that's been on my mind. And I didn't really have a subject to write about, so I never really got there. And then during the first lockdown, I was thinking about this concept of WorkJoy and started to think about how I could pull like 20 years worth of working with people, working with organizations together into something that would help people have more fun, more joy, more magic in their working lives. And I started thinking about it, and I started writing it, in fact, probably nearly 3 years ago, definitely 2.5 years ago. And I started the whole process, and I was looking at what do I include in it, and I looked at like what the chapters would be and what's the kind of vibe of it. And I spent quite a long time, a good few months working all that out with a wonderful book coach and publisher, Alison Jones at Practical Inspiration Publishing, who are the publishers of the book. And we spent lots of time working through it. I did lots of development work. I wrote things like, what are the top things I want to include in each chapter? And then I went and put it in the freezer for a while. I put it on ice for a little while because I wanted to do some more digging, do some more detail, do some more research, and also get different perspectives on it. So I think we probably first talked, because you are, what I should say is the story of the podcast, the WorkJoy Jam, is Simon is the reason that there is a WorkJoy Jam podcast. Because I was chatting with Simon and I went, I really want to do a podcast, because probably even more than I wanted to write a book, I've always wanted to do a podcast. But I said, Simon, I can't do a podcast because I don't get the technology and I'm really scared about it. And Simon, you said to me, basically, you didn't say it in these words. You basically said, stop being an idiot. It's really easy.
As if I would say such an awful thing.
I did. Oh. And then you said the magic words, which is, if you record them, I'll do the production for you.
Yeah.
And that's in your like area of zone of genius.
It is.
So it would not have happened had it not been for you, Simon. So you can take some credit for that. So I did the podcast. I put a theory of WorkJoy into a coaching program called the WorkJoy Way, and we've had lots of people work through that program. So we've got amazing stories of people who've managed to go from what I call work gloom into really great work joy, really enjoying their careers, really getting out of their work what they want to get out of it. And I've created a club as well. So we've got a community of people who come together on this subject of WorkJoy. And then eventually I was like, okay, now I've done all these other things. I should probably actually write this book that I started
get down to it, yeah.
writing. When you think, okay, time to put pen to paper, obviously typing to Word document, but effectively pen to paper. And I started writing it, fully engaged with it at the beginning of January 2022, and it's coming out in January 2023. And I think the reason I want it written is, and why I think it's important, we spend, as human beings, we spend about a third of our entire lives at work or working. And the whole pandemic thing of, are we at work, are we at home, etc., kind of just, you think about when we are working, wherever we do that, whatever our context is,
Yeah.
at home, in an office, in a hospital, in a school, in a factory, wherever it is that work is being done, it's a third of our entire lives. And remember, we spend like a third of our entire lives sleeping as well. So,
Well,
it doesn't
more
leave.
for some of us.
I mean, yeah, for sure. Sleep is the basis of my well-being, so always value your sleep.
Snap, same.
But I think here there's this, a lot of people, there's a massive joy gap in people in their lives, in their working lives. And work can be a source of massive amounts of kind of real life affirming, joyful, brilliant, exciting, engaging stuff. But it can also be massively frustrating, annoying, can be boring. It can be downright soul destroying in some situations, right? So we have these two extremes. And the interesting thing is, those extremes can actually exist in the same job with the same person.
Of course, yeah.
Because work is not just one set thing. There are so many things that are encountered in it. And what I wanted to do with the book is to help people find a way where they can have great levels of work joy, not 100% because we live in the real world,
Yeah.
but be able to really enjoy the work they do, to spend that third of their lifetime actually having a good time, or at least most of it. There's always going to be stuff that annoys us, but because that's real life. And there's organizations and policies, and there's technology that frustrates us, and all kinds of things that will happen. But actually being able to do stuff that makes us feel good is a great thing to have. And I just don't want everyone to spend their lives being miserable at work. I feel like it's such a waste of your potential, and such a waste of your creativity and your energy to be miserable, to have that sense of work gloom. So my plan is, with the book, is to help more people do that. That's what I want to do.
Amazing.
Did that actually answer your question?
It did.
Okay, cool.
It answered it very well. So this concept of work joy is really interesting to me. The idea, and particularly the way you described it just then, the fact that joy and not sorrow, but joy and frustration, or joy and the tensions of work, can coexist at the same time.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your personal experience of work joy? What's it been like for you in your role?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I've worked in lots of different contexts and in lots of different industries, and I'd call myself a bit of an adventurer when it comes to my career. I've done things like, I worked in customer service, in call centers. I've worked in learning and development. Like, Simon's laughing because we've had a very similar,
very similar,
very similar
experience,
journey through life, and then moved into learning and development, moved into HR, looked after people stuff. I've done it in retail. I worked in financial services. I worked in the public sector. I've worked in sport. And now I work in my own business, or businesses, really. And I think that adventure through things, and being able to see different contexts and different ways of working, different purposes, different values, I've always been able to find the joy in what I do. Partly because I really love work. Like, I think work can be all those wonderful things, but also partly because each time there was challenges, when I felt the work gloom, I was able to find ways of exploring it and understanding it and kind of doing something about it. And to really have, I mean, it's in the book, there's a whole section on, like, what's the work joy mindset? What are the things that we can do to get our mindset there? And I think I developed that as I was working, without even knowing that was what I had done. You can kind of work through it, and being able to find the joy, and being able to say, actually, as well, that my time here is done. And I think sometimes we overstay in organizations, but I was always really clear about, like, if this job is done, I'm done, and I'm ready to move on and kind of try something different and explore something new. That's not for everyone. Some people like to go really deep and stay in places, but you have to work out for yourself what's really great for you.
Yeah.
And then by doing it for myself, I've been able to kind of translate that, and how do I do it for other people, and how do I help other people? And there are just some key things that you can do, like thinking about your mindset, thinking about your values, thinking about your boundaries, thinking about what's important to you in your career, thinking about what kind of boss do you want to work for. And that's really, for me, what I did, and then what I've helped other people do. And that's the guidance and the kind of real life practicality that's in the book.
Yeah, and it is a very practical book. It's a practical manual. Why is that important rather than just, talking about theoretical stuff, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I did have a moment a couple of months ago when we were going through the kind of typesetting process, and the whole, like, the book's written now, and like it's in the machine of publishing, where I went, oh, do you think I should have made it more theoretical? Should I have done more? And I had like a proper, people would call it imposter syndrome moment, about the
Yeah.
fact that this isn't a PhD thesis, and I haven't got all
Thank heavens.
I know, like, what am I doing? But for me, I am like a massive nerd. You'll see this is just most of my books from a work perspective. The rest of them are in home. Like, I am a massive, massive nerd for learning. I love it. And I love reading all the books. And what I found with so many books is I love the theory. So I love a bit of theory. I love a little model to help you understand stuff. I love the research. I love the numbers. But often when I was reading a book, I was kind of craving, so what's next? What do I actually do? How do I actually make this stuff happen? So when you talk about things like boundaries, okay, so I know boundaries are really important, but how do I actually implement them in my life? So what I decided to do with this book, and I hopefully get myself honest with this, is to use the theory to inform it, but to actually make it a practical toolkit where people could go and say, hang on a minute, whether they want to read the whole thing, like, you could read it beginning to end, and it hopefully makes sense there. But also you might kind of pick out some things and say, actually, I want to look at this and I want to look at this. You can go and do it, and there's practical things. And in addition to the book itself, you'll be able to download a workbook from the website to work alongside it. So for me, some people don't like writing in books. It's like, no, we must keep them pure. Now, I would scribble all over mine.
It depends on the book.
Yeah,
it depends on the book, and it depends on what's going to happen to it afterwards. But that's a whole other podcast.
That's a whole other thing. But there is a downloadable templates with things that you can write on, things that you can work on. So keeping it like in that, let's go and take something and do it practically. I talk a lot about experimenting, like giving some stuff a go. You don't have to be successful at everything. You can just give it a chance and see where things go to. So for me, it is informed by theory, but it's also informed by 20 years worth of practice as a coach, as a trainer, as a person who helps organizations to work in the right way. So it's theory practical, but the main bit is it's a toolkit that you can go and actually use and hopefully make a difference in your life. And I say hopefully with actually, I know, because there's many people who've worked through these exercises where have tried and tested stuff and they have actually made a difference for people.
And it's thorough. I mean, you haven't left many stones unturned. You talk about life values, boundaries, stories, learning, squads, very interesting. Careers, organization, bosses, goals. I mean, if you had to pick one essence of WorkJoy for you, which do you think, can you? And if you can, which one would it be?
Can I pick a couple? Because I'm not very good at picking one.
I'll let you.
I'm
being very generous today.
You're being very generous. I think the first thing I would say is ignore all the chapters for a minute. I think the very essence of WorkJoy is understanding that if you take personal responsibility for this, it is within your power. It's within your gift. I always think of it as Dorothy with her ruby slippers, like she had the power all along.
Yeah.
Me, I think in musicals. That's how I work. But you have the power to change this stuff. And I think one of the things where people get stuck in that work gloom state is when they forget that they have the power to do some stuff about it. So the first thing for me is a big sense of personal responsibility, and you can make this happen. You can't change everything, but if you control the controllables, we all know that good things can happen. So I think that would be my first thing. I think the second thing, and it's actually kind of the big first chapter, is about reminding ourselves that work fits into life and that our life is a big thing, first of all. And I personally, and it's written all over the book, hate the term work-life balance. I find it really, really frustrating. The idea that, number one, work comes first in that sentence.
Yeah.
What? I just, like, and ordering makes a difference in terms of what you say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Work comes first and life comes second, and they're supposed to be in balance. What's that all about?
It's a very Victorian view, isn't it?
It's just so unhelpful,
Yeah.
because sometimes we all know this: big project, going for a big promotion, big career move, changing organization. Sometimes work is like right out front.
Yeah.
Equally, life, moving house, having kids, getting married, doing anything in life, having a hobby, having anything that you want to do, having a
Yeah.
dog, whatever it
Yeah.
is. Sometimes life becomes the kind of main focus. And what I just advocate for is that we think about life as like a big balloon, and that inside of it you can have different balloons in there, and so in that will be work somewhere, and you've got to think about how does that fit into your life.
Yeah.
So I think first of all, the life thing is really, really important, because we need to take a step back and kind of get that helicopter view that we're not talking about our entire life when we're talking about work, but we are thinking about how does work fit into our life.
Sure.
And I think if we can get that perspective first of all, which is why it's like the first chapter, it will really help to think about all the other things. And there are two others that I would pick. I should say we're going to have three. The two others I would pick are, you probably won't be surprised by this, bearing in mind that you are like the storytelling man. Is I think stories is really important, but I would take that from the angle of we need to really understand the stories that are going on in our heads, and whether they're based in reality or based in
Absolutely.
fantasy. And like 80% of the stuff that goes on in here is just made up,
Oh yeah.
and it's dramatized, and it's like mountains where molehills once stood, and we kind of have all these interactions, and the stories that exist in my head versus your head, the stories about me in your head, the stories about you in my head, the stories about us and other people. There's so much complexity there.
Yeah.
But actually we have the power to rewrite our own stories.
Mm.
And I like to think of like Natasha Bedingfield off of the early 2000s, like the rest is yet unwritten. You haven't written the rest of your career story, the rest of your life story. I'm not going to talk entirely about music, but I just think it's going to come in. I just can't help myself.
I was going to say it's just another day, isn't it? We're talking
It's
about
just another day
Natasha
in life of
Bedingfield.
I mean, who remembers Natasha
I
Bedingfield
do.
from
Was
the
it
early
These Things? I
2000s?
love These Things.
Oh
That's a
yeah,
great song.
oh
Anyway,
yeah. I've
back
got
on track.
a pocket full of sunshine.
Yeah.
That's another one. Anyway, where was I at? So I think there's something here about taking the decision to kind of write the rest of your story,
Yeah.
and to be the kind of core character in your
Sure.
story. So often we put our bosses as a core character, or the people we work with, or our families, but actually you're the protagonist of your own
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
Take some ownership and work with it. And then the other one, you mentioned it, was around squads. And I think, oh my God, I want to say all the chapters, but the squads one for me is thinking about who do you have in your world who can enable, who can support, who can make the joy happen for you. And we look at it on kind of 6 different characters almost of what people bring and what you might need a little bit of more of. And some people need more challenging, some people need more cheerleaders. And I think it's just really interesting to think about who is around you, because the people that you surround yourself with will help determine how much joy you can get.
Absolutely. Of those three, is there one that is, personally meaningful to you? Have you got some sort of examples of, when you've
Ooh.
used stories or your squad or?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, definitely my squad would be the one I would pick. And like Simon, clear, clear person in my squad. And you fill quite a few roles, actually, I would say. I think you're a massive
Oh.
cheerleader. I also think you challenge me on stuff like actually just get on with it and make stuff happen. So it's really lovely to have people. And I think, especially in my world, because 6 years ago I left the world of employment and I went, I'm going to go and work for myself. And kind of stepped out on this big adventure. And I am a sort of person who I'm really happy to step into that, but I need to know there's people around me. And one of
Yeah.
the big things that I was really worried about. So I probably should have been worried about whether I'm going to be able to pay my mortgage and all that kind of stuff. When you leave a safe
Yeah.
haven of employment, and I loved my job, right? I absolutely loved my job. I loved where I worked, but I'd kind of come to the end of what I was able to do
Yeah.
in that world. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go and do this. But I wasn't worried about all that stuff. I probably should have been. But what I was worried about is I was really worried about losing that sense of team and losing
Sure.
the sense of people around you to support
Yeah.
you. And when you go out on your own, that's a scary moment. But I have spent a lot of time over many, many years cultivating a group of a network, whatever you'd call it. I would call it a squad of people who are there, people who can challenge me, people who are there lifting me up when I'm feeling a bit like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, or this is hard, or it's like I don't know what's going on. Of people who bring a bit of magic into your life, of people who help you think differently and be creative. So I think for me, that one personally, especially on my journey from employment into business founding, business running, business
Yeah.
success, has and continues to be the thing that helps me get work joy. Like,
Mm.
I love people. I wouldn't do the job I do if I didn't love people, right? I find
Yeah.
everyone fascinating. And I think having that group, and it continues to grow and it continues to morph, and different people come in and out of your world, but actually being able to really value that and utilize it, and remember that asking for help is like one of the best things you can do.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I often ask too late. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm having
Should
a
have done
nightmare
that,
now.
right?
Let me ask now. And you're like, why didn't you do this a week ago?
Yeah.
But I think for me, that's really important. I think for other people, it depends on where you are in your career, what your preferences are. And I think that's a big message of work joy as well, as although there are things you can do, the exact combination of factors and things that will work for you is going to be unique to you because you're an individual.
Yeah.
So take the advice and then go and explore and experiment with which way works for you.
Yeah. You said before that, you had to leave the job you're in just because you felt it was time. This isn't a
Yeah.
book, though, that's about, how to leave your job or how to fix yourself and your attitude at work. A lot of people, though, they do kind of hover around that liminal little space or of should I stay, should I go? Especially at this time of year when we're thinking about, what's on the horizon, what's next, what will I do after my bonus is paid out?
Yeah.
says
And
the
also,
person that maybe did that 12 years ago. Got my bonus now,
now I
bye.
can go.
uh,
Bye-bye.
I mean, what advice would you give people who are thinking like this time of year, should I stay or should I go?
Yeah, and you're the one who's brought the music reference in just there, by the way. See, it wasn't me this time. Don't get me dancing, I won't be able to think. So I think this whole question, should I stay or should I go, is one where we are in a state of possible work gloom. So this is often we're in a state of work gloom. And the easiest option sometimes seems to be, well, I'll just go somewhere else, because somewhere else, shiny recruitment website, the person who's like, oh, you should come and work here, it's wonderful. And pretending that there's no challenges in this organization and you know what, we'll pay you a bit more money and you won't ever have any problems ever again if you come and work for us. You know the ones, right?
I do, yeah, it's great.
And then you get there and you go, oh, and that was all smoke and mirrors. And actually, this is the real world. And the real world of organizations is there is no such thing as a perfect one.
Yeah.
And I think remembering that is really important. Whether you, but you can also leave from a place of joy and you can go, do you know what, I've done my work here and I'm really happy with what I've done. I'm kind of leaving my legacy. I'm going forwards to something. So my first bit of advice is, if you are in that space and, 'tis the season when we're coming into, if you're listening to this around launch time, 'tis the season when people start thinking about this stuff and start going, right, I'm going to leave now. If you're being pulled towards something new more than you're being pushed away from something, you're probably in a good space for a decision about moving on. If you're doing it because you want to escape where you are, you probably need to do some work on yourself and on your work joy first before you move on. Because I can tell you now, if you go from being gloomy into a new organization, you're probably still going to be gloomy because you haven't fixed the stuff that's going on inside. And if you can fix the stuff that's going on inside, and I don't mean fix in a way of like you're broken, I mean fix in a way of, oh, hang on a minute, that is the thing I do not like about this organization.
Yeah.
So my new organization needs to either not have that or have that thing managed.
Yeah.
Or this is the thing I really love about this organization. So I really love that, even though I'm gloomy and I don't like it. This is the thing I really love. So I really love my boss, or I really love the purpose, or I really love my colleagues. Whatever it is that you really love, you need to make sure that you can either replicate or even increase that in the new job. But what people tend to do is they just go, I just need to forget about all this stuff because this is all bad. So we tend to go, it's all bad, big drama, everything's rubbish, and I need to go somewhere new. But by going somewhere new, sometimes you just repeat the same process over and over again. Yeah. So my thing would be, before you do any kind of escaping where you are, do a little expedition around your organization for anything that does bring you joy. Try to understand what it is and try to understand both those things. I mean, generally in life, I would say know what it is that brings you joy and know what it is that doesn't. And that will help you make the right decision. It will help you make the right thing. And I think the other thing is, when you're looking at a new organization, look for the things that are going to bring you joy in it, but also do your due diligence before you join. Don't believe the hype.
Yeah.
Get some real facts from people who work there. Really get a sense of, is this the right place for you? I mean, also, I'd be thinking about, I think it's really important that you have the right boss in
Yeah,
your
of course.
world.
Yeah.
Like, who are you going to work for? Because they're the people that you have so much interaction with. They're the people who kind of make or break your day.
Yeah.
Make sure that you're going to go and work with somebody who is going to light you up, who's going to support you, who's going to have your back, who's going to challenge you, but in the right way, who's going to help you with your career or whatever it is that you want to do. So I think it's a case of a bit of an expedition around your organization to kind of find what the joy is and where it's at. And you might well do the thing, which I call fall back in love with your organization. Sometimes you can go, oh, do you know what?
Yeah.
That's actually quite good. I really like that.
Yeah.
Or sometimes you make a decision, you go, do you know what? Right now I'm going to stay, even though there is some gloom here, because it fulfills 10 other criteria in my life that I
Yeah.
really need.
That's
Right.
that's so
And that's just real
interesting.
life.
Yeah, it is real life, and I think sometimes we expect organisations in the workplace to be better than real life, almost,
Yeah.
because perhaps because it's a managed environment. I think about a friend, a good friend who went through this kind of about a year ago, convinced that the working environment that they were in was so wrong for them, was kind of neglected by their manager. To be honest with you, went through those very familiar things that we all know about. But sort of stuck it through, tried, put some feelers out to some other place, and we've got some really good, offers and things. But he was sort of determined to stick it out and start to find the thing. Now, flash forward a year, I don't think he's ever been as happy in work
Mm,
because he's focused on the things that make that place a great place, and
yeah.
he's learned to accept it's not perfect.
Yeah.
I guess with those people who are going through work gloom, great great name, by the way, work gloom, if you're coaching them, you must hear a lot of negative stories about their experiences and about perhaps where they work, but the tone of the book really is not negative at all. It's very positive. What keeps you believing that you can turn work gloom into work joy, if you're kind of maybe getting feedback all the time that there's a lot of work gloom about?
Yeah. And first of all, I will tell you that it wasn't originally called Work Gloom, but it was called something that was slightly unpublishable. So I won't share it, but Work Gloom is where we got to, because kind of the sense of gloom is like you kind of have that, oh. And
Yeah.
when you don't have a spring in your step and you kind of like, oh, you're starting to become the computer says no person, and you're starting to be a bit like, ugh, about stuff. For me, that just says gloom. It doesn't say like you can't get out of it. It just says it's gloomy here.
Yeah.
And I think there's something there about actually how do we help people step out of that? Number one, we all as human beings have negativity bias,
Yeah.
right? We all have it. We
Very
will
true.
see a tiny little thing of something bad and assume it's this big,
Mm-hmm.
and we will see a big pile of great stuff and make it this big. Like that's just what our brains do.
Yeah.
And then we focus on this thing, and then we get really into it, and then we analyze it, and then we get deep into it, and we're like, and you kind of find yourself in that like downward spiral.
Yep.
But actually, if you focused over here on this massive pile of great stuff, we'd be like, oh, isn't that wonderful? Now, it's there in our brain. It helps keep us safe, all of that kind of stuff. So it's a good thing, but it's also something where we need to kind of realign it. And I think actually, one of the things I get people to do, and it's something you can go and download from the Create WorkJoy website right now. It's called WorkJoy. How do you get yours? Is to spend one working week tracking what brings you joy and tracking what brings you joy.
Nice. Lovely.
It's really simple. And then doing some reflection exercises after it. Again, download, write in it, scribble all over it, go for it. So that's one thing I get people to do at the beginning of any kind of coaching thing I'm working with them on. It's part of the WorkJoy Way program, and it's a freebie out there. Go download it now. Is number one, just reminding yourself what's in those piles.
Yeah.
Is a good thing. And it helps you just kind of go, oh. And I've had some people come to me and go, I did that exercise, and do you know what? Now I know this, everything else is easier. Like everything becomes slightly easier. So I no longer feel as gloomy because I realized I put this little tiny thing into proportion. And I've gone, oh, okay. And kind of it gets you to the neutral zone. So there's like gloom, neutral, joy. And actually, in a normal day at work, you'll probably experience joy and neutral, maybe a bit of gloom, and then kind of move around, doing some weird like hand movement here. When you read the book, people, you will see that there's a lovely illustration of what I'm talking about with my random hand movement. But that kind of it's really hard to go from work gloom to work joy. You need to go through neutral.
Sure.
So the first thing is, how do you get yourself to some kind of neutral zone where you can look at things rationally and logically, and like with the wonderful human bits of your brain that can go, oh, I'm going to count these things and know this and know that, and be able to focus in the right direction. And I think what keeps me being positive, first of all, is like, I'm not a glass half full person. I'm a glass overflowing person. Like, sometimes people need to really glue me down. Right? It's kind of personality driven. So that's part of it. But the other, and actually the more serious part of it, is I have seen people go from what I would call chronic work gloom, where they cannot even think about feeling any joy, to either being in the same place and having found it, having re-looked at the stuff that works for them and being like, right, I'm going to do it. Or gone, do you know what? I'm going to go somewhere else. Not because I just need to move away from this, but because what is here is no longer serving me. It's no longer the thing that brings me joy. Sometimes we've outgrown an organization. Sometimes we've outgrown a job. Sometimes we've just been with the same people for too long. We need to have something fresh and new. Sometimes things change in organizations. Sometimes, all the time, things are changing. Teams change, priorities change. We get made redundant. We have all of these kind of like life experiences within work that influence where we go. But I have seen so many people be able to change it. And actually, from stuff that doesn't take you immense amounts of money, doesn't take you immense amounts of time, doesn't require you to kind of like hurt yourself through the process. But by doing really small things that change your mindset, that help you focus on the things that are going to make the biggest difference. And, you know, I reckon probably with 10-15 minutes a day, within 6 months, you could fully change your work and life experience.
It's really interesting, that idea that you've got to get to neutral before you can get to joy. I think this probably relates to my next question, which is, you know, when if you're listening to this when it's first broadcast, it's the new year. It's that time when people are setting goals, and that's one of the chapters in the book as well. What is the secret of setting a goal and then actually sticking to it?
Now,
how do I set a goal to get to neutral?
I'm just going to grab my magic wand.
Magic wand.
And just... Bearing in mind, this whole book is based in what's the reality. I'm going to go for there is no secret, but there are some things that you can do, and different things will work for different people. I think the first thing is, in the book, I have something which I call the proud framework, which is, let's assess the goal we're setting to see if it's actually one we really want. Right? So it's like, actually, do I really want this? Is it at the right level? Is it the right size? Have I considered all the options and opportunities? Am I excited by it? Do I really want to do it? Have I got the determination to make it happen? And I also think there's something about like the New Year's resolution type of goals where we go, I'm going to ride my bike to work every day this year. Right.
Yeah, I am.
I have had this goal. I had this goal, right? You've had this goal. And
given I work from home. Yeah,
right.
I've achieved mine.
You've done. But I had this goal once. Like, you set it in January, and then I realised that where I was, I had to ride my bike and cross the South Circular. And, you know, I had seen many people being hit by cars on their bikes on the South Circular. And then I realised, oh, it's January and we live in the UK and it's rained constantly for 17 days. And I don't really like it. And when I get to work, I'm really sweaty. So then I have to, you know, go and get a shower. And then my clothes are, you know, it's just like, this goal is stupid. So number one, there is a let's just check on our goal. Is this goal actually something that we want to do? Is it the right timing? Is it the right season? Now, had that been the summer, maybe that would have been a great goal to have. But to try and do it in January when it's dark and scary and rainy.
Cold.
Just, nah. So I think there's something around, you know, really assessing if the goal is something we really want. Sometimes we go along with other people's goals. You know, that one where someone's like, I need to get someone in my squad to really help me. Ooh, you get all excited and then we're like, oh, I didn't really want to do that. And sometimes we set goals that are too big
Yeah.
and we haven't broken them down into their component pieces. So we feel like we're not achieving it. And sometimes we have goals that are so small that they're not exciting enough. And I personally advocate for big goals that are really, really exciting, but that you break down into the tiniest, 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 do it in 10 minutes part
Yeah.
and work towards it. And in the book, also, there's some guidance that comes from the world of psychology around how do you kind of hack your habits to
Mm.
be able to help you. So things like habit stacking, to put it onto stuff that you already have, because so much about achieving goals is actually creating new habits
Yeah.
to be able to make stuff happen. And it's also breaking it down. So that idea of like 10 minutes a day for anything that you want to do. And I actually relate it quite a lot when people say to me, I don't have time to do any learning and development, so I'm kind of falling behind. It's like, well, actually, if you did 10 minutes a day in just the working days in a year, not even, you know, weekends or when you're supposed to be on holiday and all that kind of stuff, at the end of the year, you'd have more than 5 full working days worth
Yeah.
of stuff done in 10 minutes a day. But we so often think in these kind of big things. It's like, okay, what could I do for 10 minutes a day that leads me 1% closer to where I want to
Yeah.
be? Or even 0.5% closer, but does something
Yeah.
towards it. So I think there are some things that you can do. I don't think there is a perfect thing. I still set goals that I kind of go, oh, that didn't really happen. But the but it's worth thinking about. Is this goal actually something I want to do? To go through that proud assessment and then to think about setting stuff that is realistic and will fit into that big thing, you know, kind of come full circle to the thing that fits into your life.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you want to do X, but you physically can't because you're doing Y, why on earth are you even setting this goal?
Yeah.
So where does it fit? Sometimes you have to delay a goal because you know it's not going to work right now. Sometimes you have to make it smaller. Sometimes you might even think about, how do I outsource some of that? How do I delegate some of that? How do I
Mm.
get someone else doing bits of that goal for me?
Sure.
So I think we spend very little time setting them and quite a lot of time moaning about the fact that we haven't done anything towards them.
Mm.
It's probably more in the setting and the kind of setting yourself up for success where success happens.
I'm just picturing now outsourcing riding to work and maybe getting like a rickshaw pedalo person to
Like,
help you.
seriously,
Love it.
that would be really fun. But there are some goals that you can't do that kind of
No,
outsourcing or
no.
getting other people to help. But there are some that you can. And
But
there are some that you can go, do you know what? I just might need to, as an example, you know, if you want to build your creativity, if that's something you want to build, you might need to get some people to help challenge you on that.
yeah.
You might need to get a coach to help you with it. You might need to, you know, there's all kinds of people out there in the world that can help do stuff for you. But we often don't think that way. We think, okay, I've got to go and do it.
Yeah. Well,
It's like, what is the realistic step?
rather beautifully, the goal that perhaps you set yourself 3 years ago, you had to put on pause until you found the right people around you to challenge you, to support
Yeah.
you, and to get you to where you needed to do, which is where you needed to be, which
Yeah.
was publishing a book. You know, amazing,
Yeah.
and that's a big goal ticked off your list. So I guess my final question of this extra special episode of the WorkJoy Jam is, what's next? And you
Oh.
have noticed you said this book, this book. Is there another book?
So, one thing I realized when I was writing this book was that there's a lot of other stuff I want to write about with this. And this book is very much focused on you as an individual. Take some personal responsibility. Here is some stuff you can do. You can go and change your world. Be Dorothy, click your heels, find ways of making it happen. But while I was writing it, I was also like, oh, there's loads of stuff that like bosses and leaders and managers could do to help make this stuff happen.
Yeah.
And as organizations, when we think about kind of the bigger ecosystem of organizations, there's some stuff that you can do to build that in, to kind of bake it into your organization. Now, I will always advocate for you are responsible for your own work joy, but the influence of other people is always going to be there as well. So there's also, I had quite a few bits that came out of the book because it was too long. So I do have a Word document that's currently called WorkJoy Leftovers. So there's some stuff there that you might see coming out. But for
Cool.
me, I think not immediately. I think I need to take a break from the writing process.
Well deserved.
And
Well
kind
deserved.
of just to kind of be excited about this book and share this book and get this book out there. But if there were to be more, I think there would be one about leading WorkJoy and how do you help create that in your team as a leader.
Lovely.
And I think there might also be one around, you know, the joyful organization. How do we make organizations better, and how do we make them more joyful? So I think there's something there. And I've got another book in mind as well, but I'll leave that one for another day, because that's a slightly different one, not a WorkJoy one.
Well, I'm look forward to reading those, or doing another podcast in the future where we're launching the Joyful Organization or the Joyful Manager. I think that'd be fantastic. Well, Beth, it's been wonderful having you on my podcast. That's not really my podcast. Oh, no, thank you for asking me to ask these questions and chat with you. It's always a lovely to chat with you, but it's so interesting. I think people will really, really benefit from getting this book, exploring what it means, because as you quite rightly say, who has time to be gloomy in if you can help yourself, if you're in a lucky enough position to be able to help yourself out of it and choose not to be, then you need the tools around you to help you do that.
And who would want to choose to be in that zone? Like nobody would actively choose it. So choose something different, but here's a toolkit to help you make that actually happen. And I would just really encourage people, if you want to read it, it's available in good bookstores. It's available on bookshop.org, on Amazon. You can do a Kindle version. I don't read on screen. I like a real book. I like to feel it. But, lots of people do. And do go and download as well the workbook that goes alongside it. That'll be available from when the book is launched, because that'll be your practical toolkit to take with you and to scribble on, and to really think about how do you apply the stuff that's in there into your own world and into your own life.
Fantastic.
And thank you so much, Simon, for stepping into the hosting hot seat. It's been an absolute joy. You see, I've thinking about how do you outsource this goal to somebody else.
Job done.
There you go. Get in a member of your squad who's good at that stuff and say, can you do this for me? Ask for help. There we go. Demonstrated.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Simon.
Bye.